G'day Bomber fans, practice match done over the weekend, the fans are going crazy, a glorified training session has turned into a nightmare for some. It's going to be an interesting review today. Some people are absolutely losing their minds, some are way too relaxed about it. I'm hoping to convince some of you guys on either side to meet in the middle a bit. We obviously lost to the Saints in a big way, it's not ideal, but also it's a practice match. It's not even an official practice match, it's pretty much match sim. So let's not lose our heads, let's calm down and get into a far from impressive match sim review. Before I get into the nitty gritty, a little recap of events. The first quarter, it was a funny one to start. I feel like the Saints had all the play, or around the ground they had all the play. We got a lot of the ball in the right areas, but they looked more convincing with it. But that happened for most of the game, obviously. But we held up all right down back early. It was a slow game to start. We did well out of the guts, but only really scored from individual acts of brilliance from Redmond and a fortunate clearance kick landing in Langford's arms. The only time a set play worked was when we rebounded from defence all the way to goal, where Guelphy marked and eventually missed a sitter. It was 14-21 at quarter time in favour of the Saints. Didn't really tell the full tale though, I think. Both sides seemed pretty content to change around the tone of the game. There were times where both went red zone just for the sake of it, I guess. But that's what happens with these games. Lots of situational play that doesn't match the situation. We're testing the waters in some areas for the regular season. We started off the second quarter with some more lateral ball movement, I guess, to see how that goes. And there was some real heat at the contest as well early. It looked good, but then the Saints started to show more intensity. There was always pressure and more of them working for each other, which is inexcusable in regular season. Here I'm not too fussed though, but it's the main reason why they started dominating the scoreboard. They kicked 4-0 in the second quarter. From there the game was won for them. We then rested some big players, Goldstein, Merritt, Stringer, Reed. They were replaced by some B-tier guys like Lewis Hayes and Nick Bryan, so we clearly went in with a pretty poor second half team. The first half as a whole was obviously not a fun watch, but I think it really showed more of a differential between the two sides' mentality and attitude, which I can let slide in a game like this. Third quarter, Saints kept scoring. It took a great Langford mark and goal for us to break a 6-goal streak for them. The goal itself came from a Lewis Hayes spoil in defence, which was great, but again, it was the Saints in control. After the first quarter, we only kicked 3 goals for the rest of the game, and 2 of them came in this term. Guelphy popped up on the end of a really good Laverty entry to take a mark and finish. It was well overdue after that early sitter he missed in the first quarter. The last quarter, if I'm being honest, was a bit of a blur. It was hard to take notes when the game was just boring. There was not a lot going on. It was more of the same. We struggled to transition as we did all game, and they didn't struggle to transition. Tough conditions here as well. I feel like the wind picked up at times. Don't know if that's the case. Maybe the skills just got worse. I don't know. I wasn't really paying too much attention in this quarter. The Saints ran out easy winners by over 10 goals. We only kicked 5 goals for the match. Let's talk pros and cons. I think it's a good way to do it in this game, starting with the pros because there are less of them. I think our stoppage work was great, especially with Goldstein. It lessened a bit when Bryan replaced Goldie in the ruck, but with Goldie, Merritt and Parrish and Setterfield, we looked really good at winning stoppages, something that we lacked a bit at times last year. I think Goldstein was one of our best on ground when he was playing. His craft is just exceptional. It's miles above that of Bryan. Around the ground, he's not as prominent as Marshall, but his hit-out work was great. We won some powerful clearances. We just didn't use the ball well after it. That was the issue with the midfield. Aside from that, it was fun. I thought our key-back duo of Reed and Mackay looked strong while they were on field together. It was harder on Mackay after Reed left because of how inexperienced that backline became. He was having to work with Hayes instead of Reed, and even Cox a bit, I think, or smaller players. But when Reed and Mackay were together, it was promising. Mackay took a really nice contested mark early that set the tone. He had some good moments, but I actually think Reed looked the better of the two. He had some really good defensive one-on-ones. It feels like a new recruit seeing them both line up together, both 2 new recruits, really. It's good. I would like to see a full match with them down there next week in a more defined game, not just match sim like this one, but the signs are promising. I know Mackay had a few goals kicked on him, but I think a lot of that was down to our midfield putting him under so much pressure. And injuries, or lack thereof, we are yet again clean. It's good going into a new week knowing the squad is still in a good spot, especially because we were missing so many key players. Ridley, Draper, Wright, Hobbs and Caddy, they're all probably going to play next week against the Cats. So it makes things easier. You look at the spots that we were poor in, adding a Ridley or a Wright or a Draper instantly fixes them. And also, the reserves game after, we saw young players also get through unscathed. Jaden Davey played footy for the first time in 3 or 4 years, which is awesome. Archie Roberts was great. Apparently, he kicked a couple of goals, but that's it for the positives. Alrighty, cons. Our backline was under the pump. I feel bad for the negative attention Mackay is getting because it really wasn't his fault, as I said. Kings, 4 goals. I think think it's mostly down to the pressure he was put under. There was one one-on-one contest where I thought Mackay was bodied a bit too easily, but aside from that, I thought he was alright. Our back line was under immense pressure and couldn't exit the ball with cleanliness at all. There were hacked and rushed kicks. They would just return over their heads. The Martin experiment wasn't really shown off at all. He got a lot of the ball, but didn't have much impact in my eyes. McGrath and Heppel were constantly thrown into hard situations with ball in hand, making life just as hard for our keys, having to deal with the heat of repeat entries. And the Saints, they transitioned the ball so easily on the flip side. It was disappointing not to see glimpses of quality ball movement from us, but to see so much of it from the Saints. They found it so easy to package little highlight reels of play through the middle of the ground, which we just didn't defend at all. Our ball use was really poor. This is a good problem to have early, though. This is one that can be fixed with ease. It's just preseason jitters. Every team has this issue. Find me a team that is using the ball at their best right now. You won't. Even players like Merritt and Martin had uncharacteristic turnovers and pretty poor days, if I'm being honest. So it's a con, but not one I'm too worried about. St Kilda had some really strong performers off halfback or the wing area. Darcy Wilson and Riley Bonner were two that I just kept seeing with ball in hand. They found their own footy. Their attacking work was really frustrating because they exposed issues we had a lot last year in regards to our team defence. I felt bad for Dersma, who's going to look like he didn't defend his man, even though the onus isn't really on him if you watch closely. But yeah, that's something I think we need to see fixed early in the year. It looked like they had an extra player or two on field at times, and that does also come down to intensity, which is something I'm not too worried about in a match like this. Something I am worried about, though, is our forward line. I just couldn't find anything nice to say about it. At least down back there were glimpses, but up forward it was just a poor day. This is the one area that I'm worried about after the match, or even before going into it. Langford was the only one that showed anything, I reckon, and Gresham, I guess he had those nice goal assists and some good midfield work, but they were carrying that forward line. Wiedemann and Jones were non-entities. They may as well have been on the bench. Guelphy and Menzies didn't really do much. I was really disappointed in Menzies. It's not all their fault. I thought the ball use going inside forward 50 was atrocious. St Kilda are a fantastic defensive side, and we made it really easy for them to intercept. But when the ball was on the ground, they just cleaned up when there was space. It was embarrassing to watch at times. Our small forwards, our pressure forwards, just let players like Bonner run out unopposed at times. It was hard to see Menzies and Guelphy just non-entities like Wiedemann and Jones, but for different reasons. It was like last year when we were so poor at letting teams, I guess, transition the ball from defence to attack. I would hope Menzies and Guelphy and others would be doing more come round one if they play, because I thought everybody, bar Nick Hind, was down in that regard, if I'm being honest. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say Nick Hind has shot into my best 22 for the year just because of how much pressure he did apply when he played compared to those in the same position. Some things I should note, changes to the team, not negatives or positives. Durham did play mostly full midfield minutes. I don't know how I felt about it. I think systematic footy isn't one of his strongest assets, so putting him there, I don't know, he just didn't look up to it compared to those around him. He was often placed on Jack Steele, who had a field day. I would much rather see Setterfield stay there for the year, especially because the guys who replaced him on the wing were Sartas and Cox. We went from having a really great wing duo in Durham and Martin last year, and now we're just moving them away. I love Dersma. I thought he was awesome, one of our best, but Sartas is not ready yet on a wing especially. His ball use is not up to standard. I don't care what anyone says. You can just tell he needs more time. And Nick Cox, I just don't know where he fits in this team. He was everywhere today. At forward, back, wing. He had some nice moments, some good groundwork, but nice moments isn't enough for a guy in his fourth year. And yes, it's a practice match, but I'd love to see a solidified wing duo by round one. And for that to happen, I think you need Durham or Martin joining Dersma, and Martin looks a lot better in defence than Durham does in the engine room. So I'd love to see Durham and Dersma. I don't know if Scott's going to go that way, unfortunately, or even Jake Kelly when he comes back. I know we spoke about Jake Kelly not being the man for that job, but it's a lot better than Sartas and Cox, in my opinion. I will give out some votes just for those who want to know how these previews usually go. If you're new, I give best on ground votes. I get you guys to do the same in the comments. I'll tally them in the regular season, but this for now is just so we can know who I thought the best players on the ground were. One vote to Zach Reed. I thought his first half made us look a lot better than we were. He was really solid back there and a bit of a shining light on an otherwise hard game to watch. Goldstein the same. I really liked him in the ruck. I'm keen to see him and Draper work together, but I think Dersma was probably our best player. He was really good working both ways on that wing. He helped out a lot deep in defence. That could be a steal of a trade, quickly becoming my favourite trade from the period, not going to lie. That is all though. Trying to summarise a big game in under 10 minutes is hard. I'll talk more about it in some videos throughout the week. I might do an updated best 22 video because there's been a lot of changes to, I guess, my views on what the team should be. And again, guys, don't lose your heads. Collingwood lost to North. These games don't really mean that much if we're being honest. If we get absolutely thumped next week by Geelong, go crazy in the comments. But really, the only games that mean anything are the ones for premiership points. This is training. If we start losing in the regular season, you guys can get mad, but there's a bit of an overreaction online and an underreaction from some. We can be disappointed, for sure, but we shouldn't be too mad and read into this too much. We obviously have issues that need fixed, but it's not the end of the world. That's all though. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers.